The reason that the economy was so sick, it's not the coronavirus, it's because of everything the government did before the coronavirus. We're about to see a sovereign debt crisis. We're about to see hyperinflation, where the value of the dollar is completely destroyed. We're cutting taxes, but everybody's getting a bailout, everybody's getting a check, and nobody is asking who's paying for it. Government has to be paid for. Those tax cuts were a fraud because tax cuts have to do with cutting government spending. The cost of government is what it spends. So government spending is taxation. Every dollar the government spends is a dollar that we have to fund. They are increasing taxation. Are they going to tax us today? Are they going to borrow the money, which means they're going to tax us even more tomorrow because now we have to pay the taxes to cover the interest? Or is the Federal Reserve going to monetize the debt? Are they going to print more money, which means we pay for government through debasement of the currency? This thing is going to implode, and it's going to implode soon. The party is going to end, the dollar is going to crash, and a tsunami of inflation that we've been exporting for years and years is going to come hitting us, our shores, and we're going to see the cost of living go through the roof. The reason that nobody can do without income for a few weeks or a few months is because everybody has debt to service. Corporations are levered to the max. They've been borrowing all this cheap money from the Fed. They've been using it to buy up their overpriced stock, so they didn't have any savings. Individual households are leveraged to the max on cheap consumer credit. They got mortgage debt, student loans, auto loans, credit card debt. They're living paycheck to paycheck. You take that paycheck away, they can't pay their rent, they can't pay their mortgage, they can't pay their debts. Everybody is broke, nobody has savings, and then this crisis comes. And a lot of people want to talk about, well, this is like World War II. It's the opposite of World War II, because when World War II hit, nobody got bailed out, nobody got a stimulus check, everybody got a bill. We're pretending that the government can support the people by using a printing press, that all we have to do is print money and nobody has to work, nobody has to produce, we can have all this stuff for free. Well, we're about to find out the hard way that the most expensive way to pay for government is through inflation, through printing money. That's what we're doing, and we're about to relive the lessons of history, because a lot of countries have tried this before and it has ended in disaster every time it's been tried. You got to look at the price of gold, which is already going up, but at some point it's going to go up much faster. You got to look at the exchange rate of the US dollar versus other currencies. Now, right now the dollar is stable, but it's not going to stay stable for long. At some point the dollar is going to fall. And then you got to look at long-term interest rates. Wait for long-term interest rates to really start spiking higher. That is ultimately going to happen. Now, if you wait for those three things to happen, a big move up in gold, a plunge in the dollar, and a sharp increase in long-term interest rates, it's too late to do anything about it financially. I mean, you've missed the boat. What you've got to do now, and what I've done personally, what I'm helping my clients do, is get out of U.S. financial assets, get out of the dollar, get out of U.S. bonds before that crisis. The government can fund its operations honestly through taxation, where it actually takes money away from some people and gives it to other people, or it can do it dishonestly, the way it's doing now through inflation. Have the Federal Reserve create money out of thin air and just give it to people, just spend it into circulation. But when the Fed does that, you're not getting that government for free. That means that people that already have dollars in savings, in annuities, in pensions, through their mattress, wherever you have dollars, those dollars lose their purchasing power. And that purchasing power is transferred to the people who are receiving the government money. So instead of the government taking your money, the government is taking the purchasing power from your money. You're going to be stuck with this bill. If you have savings, if you've got a portfolio of bonds, or you've got an annuity or cash value in an insurance policy, or you're working for wages, the value of what you earn is about to collapse, in that the cost of living is about to explode, and that's how we're paying for this. They just print money. They just continue the QE, they bail out everybody, and they destroy the dollar. A hyperinflation is much worse economically than just a massive economic collapse. The pain that that will inflict is going to be far greater, but because it may happen 6 months or a year later or 2 years later, who knows, that may be the course that we end up taking.
We already know it doesn't work, so there's nothing theoretical about it. I mean, you've had plenty of examples in history where currencies have been destroyed based on what they now call modern monetary theory. Look, the whole idea that you could print all this money and not have inflation the printing money is inflation. So by definition, you're creating inflation, so you have it. Now, obviously, there are situations where you can create inflation and it may manifest itself in rising asset prices before it ultimately moves into rising goods prices. And if you have a very productive economy that is generating more output of goods, then maybe you can create a lot of inflation without the price of goods going up, because you're merely preventing the price of goods from falling, which would have otherwise benefited the citizens, because they would have been able to buy more for less. But at the end of the day, what they're advocating is not a free lunch, right? You can't have government for free simply because you print the money to pay for it. In fact, the most expensive way to finance government is through inflation, is through printing money. It's much better to do it through legitimate taxation, but of course, the public will resist taxes, especially when they're already broke, like most Americans are. But this is a panacea for government. They can pretend that they can have this laundry list of socialist programs. I mean, look at what we're doing now. All the bailouts, all the enhanced unemployment benefits, the PPP, right? Everybody is getting bailed out and nobody is getting a bill. Nobody's taxes are being raised. Everything is being paid for by the Fed because we think it's all free, because everybody believes in MMT, whether they want to acknowledge it or not. But we're about to see that it's going to be a complete disaster, because the dollar is going to collapse. And then, of course, what the MMTers don't get is, well, what do you do? What happens when inflation goes out of control? What happens when prices really start to go up? How do you stop it? Once you've let that genie out of the bottle, how do you put it back in? It's impossible. That's the only way that they can try to pay for everything they're promising the voters in exchange for their votes. Medicare for all, free college, reparations for slavery. I mean, where's the money going to come from? I mean, we're broke. We're already hopelessly in debt. The middle class can't pay higher taxes. If they raise taxes on the rich, well, they won't collect very much. There won't be much wealth left after they finish taxing it. So the only source of the money is the Fed. So obviously they're going to embrace this theory because it's so self-serving. And, they've been lulled into a false sense of complacency because it seemed that we've been able to get away with it. We have printed all of this money since the '08 financial crisis, and everybody thinks it hasn't caused a problem. Everybody says, look, see, there's no inflation. We printed all this money. The balance sheet has exploded. And look, prices haven't gone up. So they now have this false sense of security that there's no limit to how much they can print. Well, what's basically been keeping us from having to deal with those consequences has been that reserve currency status, has been the willingness of the rest of the world to hold on to that paper in the form of treasury bonds or corporate bonds or mortgage-backed securities or even U.S. stocks, right? So as long as they're willing to park the money in financial assets, then it doesn't bid up consumer prices. But once they lose confidence in the dollar, then they lose confidence in all dollar-denominated assets, and now they want out. And now all that money is going to come rushing back to the U.S., bidding up the price of whatever's not nailed down.